This is what driving with an out-of-tune engine feels like. Keep your engine running smooth. Stop by AutoZone and get all the parts you need for a tune-up. Maximize summer miles per gallon with 2 10-ounce bottles of Gum Out Expert Series fuel system treatment for just $8. Restrictions and details in store.
AutoZone. A Memorial Day doubleheader. First in Yankee Stadium, the Royals face the Yankees. Then in Oakland, it's the Tigers and A's. The Yankees and Royals at 12:30 Eastern, followed by the Tigers and A's. Monday on ESPN and on ESPN Radio. This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast on ESPNRadio.com. The Best of Mike and Mike.
Hey, it's Greeny. Thank you for checking out the podcast. What a good morning this was. We had Michael Smith and Jemele Hill in studio all morning long, plus 2 hours with Brad Stevens, the coach of the Celtics, in our studio, and our reflections on the great David Letterman saying goodbye.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
Good morning. Back and better than ever. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. And 2 for the price of none in for Golic today. It's his and hers. Michael and Jemele are here from his and hers weekdays at noon every single day on ESPN2. Guys, obviously we'll get to the basketball from last night, but we'll start with what I think everyone in America has been talking about all week and certainly will be talking about today. And that is the end of an era. And as I was watching this and as I was thinking about it this week, I realized that this happens to us in sports all the time. You know, we see legends go out in sports maybe more often or more frequently than we do in anything else, just based upon the comparatively short shelf life of athletes and the ability of athletes, maybe more than almost any other forms of entertainment, to become important in our lives, someone that we become emotionally attached to. So saying goodbye to an athlete, I mean, how many times in your life, be it professionally or personally, have you felt sad and wistful and genuinely nostalgic, realizing this is the last time I'm going to see him or her out there on a court or a field of play or whatever the case may be? With people like David Letterman, it happens once a generation, and last night was that once.
Yeah, with athletes, sometimes it can be a little bit different. I remember feeling that way maybe the first couple of times Michael Jordan retired, and then some of the sting was taken out away from it because, again, he kept doing it. And Brett Favre, the same thing. Yeah, I think what it does, at least for me, seeing David Letterman, although I will not profess to be somebody who watched him every single night, clearly he became a pop culture icon. He's just somebody you were used to being there, that you knew at this time on this network, I can turn and this is what I'll find. Because sometimes building that up is all about consistency. Like when you, for viewers, I think at home, you know how this is, Mike. When you miss a show, everybody wants to know where you are, what you were doing. Everybody's used to for these last 15 years of waking up at 6 a.m. to you. And so it establishes some kind of like relationship. It feels like a family member. So there is a part of me that is a little bit wistful about this. I also feel a little old, but I guess that's to be expected.
Well, that's what I was about to say. I don't know life without David Letterman. He's been on the air since I was 33 years, right? So yeah. I was 2 years old when David Letterman first started doing late night television. I got chills watching the standing ovation he got when he came out. I mean, props to the studio audience because they sent him off in a very classy way. I mean, they wouldn't sit down. He had to beg them to stop clapping for him. And I can only imagine what he was feeling, seeing all his friends. It was a very classy and deserved send-off last night. Just can't imagine what that must have felt like, though, man. I mean, Greeny, you've been doing this for 15, so think about that. Think about how long you've been on Mike and Mike.
Yeah.
That's less than half of the time that David Letterman's been doing late-night talk. Do you ever think about, your goodbye or what it would be like when you
think about it every day? But it's the cultural impact that David Letterman has had,
sure,
I think, was evident in how significant this goodbye is. Because I was thinking Jay Leno beat Letterman in the ratings for the overwhelming majority of the time they went up against each other. I don't even remember him leaving. Like, I don't remember anyone making much of a deal out of it because, look, and I'm not knocking Jay Leno. I've never met Jay Leno. He's been on the show a couple of times. He's very into cars, and we talked about cars with him, and he was hosting the Indy 500 or wherever it was one year. So we've had him on. He was very pleasant with us. I don't mean this to knock Jay Leno. But my sense, anyway, as one who grew up watching Letterman, and now for 15 years, candidly, I haven't been able to watch late-night television. My alarm is set for 3:45 a.m. I'm not watching a show that starts at 11:30 very often. Most of the times I watch Letterman, you see it in clips, and I watch when we're on. But there was something about Letterman that just felt larger than just being funny. Jay Leno was funny, and people liked him because he was funny and he was pleasant. He was easy to take. Letterman was a little more of an acquired taste. He wasn't necessarily easy to take. He was acerbic. He was sarcastic. And he wasn't everybody's cup of tea. But for the people who did like him, I think he was much more impactful, much more significant, and certainly for me, growing up, watching him, he was much more significant to me than any other talk show host has ever been. I'm older than you are, so when he came on TV, I was 13.
Carson,
I remember watching Johnny Carson, but I was that's for me, that was that. I was a little kid. Johnny Carson was the show my parents watched. So when I got to be old enough that I was allowed to stay up that late at night and watch TV, and you'd see Johnny Carson was like my parents' talk show host. David Letterman was speaking directly to me. He was speaking to me and for me, even though he's 20 years older than I am. He really sort of spoke for the generation that I felt like I was a part of, and did so extraordinarily well, and along the way touched, I think, as evidenced by the way people have reacted to this week, even though obviously in the ratings it didn't demonstrate it in recent years. He touched a lot of people, and that I think is never going to go
Look at
away.
the top 10.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can tell by the people that came to his final show what he was thought of in this industry, and I think that speaks very well to not just his professional reputation, but to his personal reputation. You know, it's interesting when you brought up the athletic example. I was trying to think of who was it sports-wise. I mean, Jordan, obviously, that was a big deal. Cal Ripken, that was too. But the problem with athletes, so many of them, they go out unceremoniously, if I can get that out. They don't go out on their own terms. A lot of times, it's not an ending. It's well, look, if you haven't seen The Wire by now, forget it. It's almost like how Omar went out in The Wire, right? It was
so disappointing.
It was so disappointing for somebody who was so larger than life in that series. And
we need to see him and Marlo go at it.
Thank you, but that's not what you got. And with athletes, it's the same way. You don't ever get that scripted ending. They don't go out like Ray Lewis. And so a lot of times you almost forget how they left the game. This is different because this is somebody who's leaving for the most part on his own terms and was such an icon and did what he did at the top of his profession for so
33
long.
years.
And because of you, I actually got to see it live. I saw it live this season with my good friend Suzette, and I was just amazed at just how seamless everything is.
You know, if we do 33 straight shows clean, if we can do 33 straight, thank you. You know what I mean? If I can get 33 straight profanity free, lack of free, exactly, his and hers, and I'm good,
Yeah, I saw our show Shelf Life flash before my eyes.
Well, let's go back to the sports part of it. We are a sports show, and obviously we'll get to the basketball in a minute, but I feel like this is what everyone in America is thinking about and talking about right now. The example of this that I always use, there are two that I always use. One of them is Reggie Miller, and the other one is Jimmy Connors. Growing up, I played tennis, okay? And again, I'm 10 years older than you are, Michael, so when I grew up, tennis was really... It wasn't a big deal to me just because I played it, but it was just a bigger deal than it is now.
Absolutely.
Jimmy Connors, Bjorn Borg, John McEnroe, those guys were at their heyday. Martina and Chrissy were playing in every single Grand Slam final, the very tail end of Arthur Ashe. That's sort of the era of tennis I grew up in, and I hated Jimmy Connors. Hated. Like in those days, you picked someone you liked and someone you hated. My mother loved Guillermo Vilas, this Argentinian player, because he was so handsome, so I always rooted for Vilas I always rooted against Connors, always. Fast forward 10 years. They're all gone. Connor's still playing. And he made a somewhat legendary run at the U.S. Open, got all the way to the semifinals. I was rooting for him so hard that I couldn't even put it into words. Why? Because he was still there.
He lived long enough to see himself become the good guy.
Yeah, but he wasn't even a good guy. But he was a part of my life when I was 7, and he was still a part of my life when I was 17. And there is something to be said for just being there. For just in this ever-changing world where things are constantly moving and everything is here today and gone tomorrow, the fact that David Letterman is there every single night, whether you're watching him or not, is comforting. And the fact that Jimmy Connors was still out there, and then Reggie Miller is another perfect example. I grew up in New York rooting for the Knicks, and then I went to Chicago and covered the Bulls and was around them all the time, and he was the arch nemesis of both of those teams. And so I, generally speaking, from a sports perspective, always hated Reggie Miller. I rooted against him like crazy. And remember when they made that run his last year? Yeah. I was rooting for him like crazy to get to the finals and to get a championship. Why? Because he was still out there doing it. He was the last vestige of that group of guys that were so incredibly important to me. And there was just something about him. It connects to you. It's a way that it connects to you in your own life. They become a part of you, right? They're a part of you. And to me, that happens in sports all the time.
Oh, I think Kobe Bryant is probably an example of this right now.
Perfect example.
I want him to get another ring. I doubt that he will. I'm sure, obviously, he would disagree. But that's a big reason why, is because he has been an institution, to take Mike's word, for so long. And growing up in Detroit and being a Pistons fan, even though I could care less about Michael Jordan, just because the Bulls were a big rival, as he started to slow down and as he retired and unretired, I felt some kind of way, because it connected me to the time where I rooted against him so much. So even the villains, they reconnect you to those experiences, those coming-of-age experiences that you have as a sports fan.
Michael and Jemele are here. They host His and Hers every single day, noon Eastern on ESPN2, the His and Hers podcast as well, which is terrific. And so we'll get to all the sports. One more thought quickly on Dave. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Now you can test drive Snapshot to see how much you could save before switching to Progressive. Visit progressive.com/snapshot. And we'll play you some clips. Obviously, it's early in the morning now, and his show airs late at night, so many of you watching or listening at this moment probably didn't get to see it last night. So we'll play you parts of it this morning as well. There's nothing huge to give away. The top 10 list was magnificent. He brought out 10 mega celebrities who had one brilliantly funny line after another in paying tribute to Dave. But I think it would be inappropriate for me, and I know that if Mike was here, not to say a personal thank you to him for what he did for us, which is to say that we started out this show in the year 2000, and you couldn't be less significant than we were. I mean, you literally, I think we were on like 3 radio stations. We certainly weren't on TV. We weren't on locally in the market in which ESPN is based, so our executives didn't know that we were on. I honestly think if you had walked around the building of ESPN, and there were probably only 8 buildings then as opposed to the 20 that we have now, but if you had walked around the building and said, what show is on the ESPN radio network in the mornings, that more than 50% of the people would have said, we have a radio network, much less the fact that they would have known who was on in the mornings. And that slowly developed. You know, look, I mean, whatever it is, the show built up over time. But the biggest jump that we took, there's no question about it, came right at the time that we started going on David Letterman. They had us on, they called us up, and they said, could we get Mike and Mike on? And I literally thought it was a prank. You got to be kidding me. David Letterman doesn't even know who we are. And then we started going on, and there was an element of credibility that gave us, and it exposed us to a different audience. And just the first time being on there, hearing him say my name was surreal, much less walking out onto the stage. But then for him to have us back as many times as he did, there's no question that was instrumental in whatever it is that Mike and I have been able to build here over all these years. So our thanks to him personally. He made a lot of people's careers. And we were certainly among them. So a personal thanks from us, from Golic and from me, to Dave for not only a lot of fun nights and not only 30 years of fandom, but for what he did for us professionally, which I don't know exactly how you would quantify it, but it was significant. There's no question it was significant. All right, Mike, Jemele and Michael are here. Let's get to the hoops last night. And how about this guy?
Smith has it on the right wing, turns, fires. Of course, number 8 for J.R. Smith. Turning and catching for his 8th 3 of game 1. Oh, my goodness. That is a career playoff high, 28 for J.R. Smith.
Yeah, the Cavs got 28 points off their bench last night, all of them from J.R. Smith, and the only thought I had to have, maybe this is my own New York-centric way of looking at things, but I could not stop laughing. It was in this hour yesterday that Stephen A. Smith called in and basically lost his mind about Phil Jackson and all the things that he's done with the Knicks and the ping pong balls. And as I was trying to explain yesterday, there are a lot of things that you could criticize Phil for through 1 year with the Knicks. I don't know that the ping pong balls are among them. Giving away J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert may be one of them. And how ironic that there was J.R. Smith last night, who was the reason that the Cavaliers took control of the Eastern Conference Finals.
Not a good week to be the Knicks. They somehow, I feel like getting the 4th pick was just such a huge disappointment. They acted as if they had gotten the 30th pick. But look, this may be unfair, but nevertheless, I'm going to say it anyway. J.R. Smith, how he's been as a player as a Cavalier, is very much a testament to how LeBron James is as a leader. And maybe it is also a testament to how some people can't lead. And that is, to me, the beauty. It's not underrated, but sometimes it's just not talked about as much amid, LeBron and his passing ability, his impact on the game, his physical ability, is that he makes players better, not just because he's a willing passer, but because of the standard that he holds them to. Everybody didn't like Michael Jordan, okay? But everyone knows that the players who played with him felt a responsibility and a sense of urgency because of how he was as a player. And so I look at J.R. Smith, who has always been talented. He's always had this in him, but I don't think he ever felt the sense of responsibility, urgency that he feels right now with the Cleveland Cavaliers. So I understand why the Knicks fans are upset, but if they are upset at anything, be upset that there wasn't a structure in place to bring this kind of play out of him consistently. You would see it from time to time, but not like this.
No, blame J.R. Smith. I mean, look, LeBron's not walking through the Knicks door. So a lot of J.R. Smith's struggles toward the end of New York had to do with J.R. Smith. Jemele, have you not ended a relationship with somebody that you just knew wasn't right for you? And they went on to do great things and have a great life. Did you regret it?
I wouldn't say all that.
Oh, so everybody left you just fell apart.
I wouldn't take it that far.
It's all downhill after Jemele.
All right, Mike. Has a woman ever moved on from you and, she went on to have a great and happy life? He's like, oh, man, that's an indictment of me. Yeah. I'm the problem. She's great with him, but she's not great with me. So it must, no. Look, J.R. Smith was immature in New York. He wasn't the most professional guy in New York. He was the sixth man of the year, got a contract, had his great moments. And you're right, perhaps it is LeBron bringing out the best in him, something that perhaps Carmelo is incapable of doing. But move on. Let it go. You know why they gave him away for nothing? Because they couldn't get anything for him. That was his value at the point.
Yes, and that's my fault that we started this with that side of it, because today is not a day to talk about the Knicks giving up.
No, Jemele, trust me, Jemele didn't mind that. She's been waiting to troll New York.
But that said, today is a day to talk about J.R. Smith shooting the Cleveland Cavaliers to what feels like, as you watch the end of that game last night, and obviously part of it comes from the injury that we'll talk about in a second, but J.R. Smith single-handedly shooting the Cavaliers to what almost felt like an insurmountable 1-0 lead in the Eastern Conference Final.
No, it did. It just felt like, as you were watching, I hate to be extreme about it, but you just had that feeling so many times, like, Atlanta's not going to be able to beat this team. And I hate that. And that was with DeMar Carroll. And as you said, we'll talk about his injury in a minute. That was when he was in the game. Yeah. And it just felt like it was just too much. And LeBron, he was struggling. He had foul trouble early, had some kind of inexcusable turnovers. Kyrie Irving is out there hobbling. He's pretty much turned into a spot-up shooter because of his injuries. And there it is, somebody else that someone else has to contend with.
Well, not just him, but also Tristan Thompson gave him 14 points. Yeah, I mean, he's been a monster, getting him second, third possessions at times. So I talked about J.R. Smith's shortcomings in New York and maybe getting too involved in the nightlife that he says isn't as present in Cleveland. Give him credit for also bouncing back from knocking out Jay Crowder in the opening round series and getting suspended for 2 games. He's been really solid since then. And when he is on, there are few, if any, players who are more fun to watch than J.R. Smith. Because he knows it, and he's going to take every single shot, no matter how deep it is.
It's going to be a heat check. He's just going to keep firing.
He morphs into Steph Curry. Like Steph Curry was watching last night, like, man, that guy's on fire.
Yeah, step back contested threes
are good shots when he's on.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't know what percentage of those are made in the NBA regularly, but you're right. When he's hot, that's a good shot.
He had the ones from the corner where it was a weird move where he'd cross over, almost like fade away out of bounds and just went the other way. He's amazing when he's going.
J.R. Smith, 8 of 12 from 3 last night. Again, had all 28 points. Single-handedly outscored the Atlanta bench 28-19, and Cleveland takes game 1 on the road. Now, one of the reasons that it sort of feels a little bit on the verge of over, I don't want to say that because it feels like you're overstating it, and I know I'm the master of the overstatement, but boy, that thing felt over last night. Not just that they won the game, but that this happened.
James closed by Millsap, pass in the corner, tip stolen by Carroll. Carroll trying to lead the break from the right wing. Inside move, gets fouled, tumbles across the baseline.
Oh, his knee lock, his knee, oh no.
He's writhing in pain.
Big pain. I thought I saw the knee buckle, the left knee.
That's John Barry calling it on ESPN radio last night, and he thought right. You see the left knee buckle. It's one of those non-contact injuries. He grabs it immediately, leaves the arena on crutches last night. And going into this series, you already knew that the Hawks, they had 2 guys. One of the advantages you would have thought that they may have had going up against Cleveland and LeBron was that up until about a month or so ago, they had two guys who you thought could give LeBron trouble on the defensive end of the floor, meaning as defenders. One of them was Thabo Cephalosha. Well, we all know what happened there. He's not available in this series. The other, Damari Carroll, he has fallen. And they're calling it are they calling it a sprain?
Yeah, knee sprain.
It looked a lot worse.
I hope that I'm wrong. He looks to me like he has fallen and he isn't going to get up.
Yeah, and that would be such a devastating blow. And even though Bazemore, he certainly gave them a lot of energy when he was called into relief. But this is their best defender, leading scorer, I believe. And you subtract him from that unit as much of a fight as they still put up after he was out of the game, because it was still close and it was still, the game hung in the balance late in the fourth quarter. Regardless, I just think that would be a loss that is too significant for them to bear. It already, even if he were healthy, I'd still have some serious questions about whether or not Atlanta can make this a series. But this, to me, would be kind of a knockout blow.
I picked the Cavs in 7. I think you picked them in 6.
Yes.
I picked him in 6, too, for the record.
Yeah. I just wouldn't feel like this game was somehow, it's over after one game. I mean, Atlanta could get back in this. I mean, Schroeder goes 2 for 10. Millsap goes 3 for 11. Those guys can both do better. Teague, 24 shots, probably a few too many, from that point guard for this team, if you will. Probably needs to spread it out a little bit more. But, look, they were right in it. They were awful from 3, 4 of 23 as a team. Atlanta was right there. And on the Cleveland side, I look at it like this. Yes, J.R. Smith was fantastic. Can he produce that kind of production consistently? Because if he doesn't, what is Kyrie Irving at this point? He looked like he re-aggravated his knee. So where is the secondary scoring coming from consistently? I mean, they needed those 28 points from J.R. Smith. If Atlanta can pick up its production from its other guys and they pick up the slack for Damari Carroll, but Kyrie is still hobbled, Atlanta could go into Cleveland and win a game. Take back home court?
I hope so, because I'd love to see it become an interesting series, so I hope that you are right and that we are wrong. We're Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. We'll have Frank Caliendo a little over an hour from now on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, his reminiscence of being on Letterman over the years and more. And then, again, a very special visit. 2 hours today from Brad Stevens will be in studio. We'll go 4 wide here on Mike and Mike. The 4 of us, or the 3 of us, will welcome the Celtics head coach for the final 2 hours of the show in our studio. We'll talk basketball and a whole lot more. He's an Indiana guy. He's been on Letterman, so we'll have a lot of fun with him and a whole lot more. We got a bunch of football news out there, more on the hoops. We're just getting started with his and hers in the house after this word from AutoZone, where we have 4 winners now of our Mike and Mike experience at the ESPYs promotion this year, all thanks to our great partner, AutoZone, helping our fans get into the zone with what is surely going to be the sports experience of a lifetime this summer. As you've heard from some of our colleagues visiting the show, it's a fantastic evening. So for these fans, it's going to be one for the record book. And guys, I don't know if you heard, our 4th winner, and you couldn't make this up, is named Tom Brady.
No,
I swear
that's his real name?
His real name. He's from Iowa City, Iowa, and his name is Tom Brady.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
Guys, when you buy your clothes at DXL, you look good. But you feel like a rock star. So if you want to look and feel like you'll find all the brands you love, waist size 38 and up, all in one awesome store. DXL, you're looking good. Right now, Harbor Bay tees are just $19.99 each when you buy 2 or more.
The best of Mike and Mike.
So for those of us, many in our audience are up early and then go about their day, so they've not had a chance yet to hear you guys with your take on what's happened with Tom Brady and the Patriots and everything else. So let's play what Goodell said yesterday. Roger Goodell at the NFL owners meetings, the commissioner talking about Robert Kraft's decision to stand down and Goodell's next task, which will be to hear Tom Brady's appeal. Let's start with Goodell on Kraft.
The decision that Robert made was his decision. I admire and respect Robert, as you all know. We've had plenty of discussions over the last couple of weeks. And this was his initiative and something he wanted to do. And I certainly admire the step he took. We may disagree on things, but that's not unusual. That happens.
So let's start there. For those who've not had a chance to hear your take, Jemele, starting with you, what was your reaction to Robert Kraft sort of standing down as significantly as he did the other day?
I think he weighed his chances, which is exactly what he alluded to. Look, the one thing that people have made this comparison or at least they've sort of presented this theory that after the Patriots were punished, that Robert Kraft would begin to channel Al Davis. Robert Kraft has never been, or has never come off as that kind of rebel or outsider. Maybe I shouldn't use the word rebel, but he's certainly never come along as somebody who wants to be outside of the league looking in. He really cares about the NFL. He cares about the reputation of his team also. And we know how much he cares about the league because he was one of the peace brokers when it came to the labor strife. So for Robert Kraft, this was as much about him feeling as if, is this a fight really worth winning, as well as, am I willing to maybe do some damage to the NFL's reputation, which I deeply care about, just for, it may be a legitimate personal beef, but for essentially a personal beef.
Mike, you covered the Patriots. Did you interpret Kraft doing what he did the other day as any admission on his part of guilt?
No, not at all. Yeah, for those that don't know, I started my career covering the Patriots from 01 to 04, and then I covered the league as a whole here at ESPN from 04 to 09. And Jemele mentioned the CBA negotiations. Myself and Chris Mortensen, we were outside of the NFLPA offices in D.C. when Robert Kraft and our own Jeff Saturday and I were embracing. I mean, Myra Kraft was deathly ill, or it just passed away. The timeline escapes me, Bob Kraft's wife, and yet he was there bringing the sides together to avoid, an impasse, or to avoid missing any kind of games in the summer. I think it was of 2011. That to me was just a grown-up move. I like to say, is the juice worth the squeeze? And, they could have gone on, and he could have violated the league's bylaws and gone to court, to fight for what was right. But I think he looked at it as, look, I got so much equity, so much goodwill. I'm probably the most influential owner in the game. That's why they call him the assistant commissioner. Do I want to risk that, tarnish that, ruin that perhaps, when I got all 31 seem to be on the same page with the commissioner? I think he's looking at it, hey, this is chess, not checkers. I could fight this in the short term, but long term, what do I gain from it? He mentioned measuring 9 times and cutting once. So I didn't see it as an admission of guilt. So I'll just spin it to Tom Brady real quick and say, if I'm Tom Brady and I'm innocent, again, if I'm Tom Brady and I'm innocent, there's no way I accept anything short of complete eradication of this penalty. Because a reduction doesn't do anything. It just saves you 2 paychecks and gets you back 2 games earlier if it were to be reduced, but it doesn't return, your legacy to its
Brady would not be the first nor the last to fight the league on issues.
Yeah, he's got to go all the way.
Discipline or whatever the case may be. He was one of those who had his name on
the lawsuit,
the initial lawsuit when they had the CBA dealings in the first place. So he's not afraid to be a part of that. And I agree completely. That was going to be my next question. If Tom Brady drops it, at any point drops it, and explains it any other way, look, this isn't worth the fight, it isn't worth the deal. Would you interpret that as an admission?
I think most people would. The few people that don't already think that he's guilty, he's got to take it all the way. And because there's more for him at stake than just some games. There is, as Mike mentioned, his legacy, his reputation. To some degree, for some people, they may keep him out of the box of being the greatest quarterback ever just because of this. I won't keep him out of the Hall of Fame or any of the accolades, but this is such a bad look for Tom Brady right now. He's got to do everything that he can to salvage his reputation.
I guess the question is, if you are Brady and you know that you're completely innocent, because there are a very small handful of people who know exactly what happened here. And you can call me naive. I believe that Bill Belichick is not one of them. Now, we're going all the way back to January. I said this on the air. I tweeted at the time, and I continue to. As weird as the whole thing was with Belichick going all the way back to that, and obviously most memorably when he said,
I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert in footballs. I'm not an expert in football measurements. Would not say that I'm Mona Lisa Vito of the football world, as she was in the car expertise area.
It was as though a Saturday Night Live sketch had broken out at One Patriot Place. That said, perhaps because he treated it that way, because the normally closed-mouthed Bill Belichick handled it the way he did, I believe him. I believe that he doesn't think anything went wrong. Brady knows what happened. McNally knows what happened. The one thing that is a lock is the two of them know what happened because McNally took the bag of balls and went out to the field. So he either stopped it, and he stopped in the bathroom. He either let air out of the balls in there or he didn't, right? I mean, that he either did or he didn't. There's no third explanation. He either let air out of the balls there or he didn't. If he didn't, then nothing happened. If he did, I guess there is some question as to whether Brady knew about it directly or not.
Right.
You look skeptical.
No, you got it, because I was like, again, know about it, assuming that there was something nefarious going on.
Correct. That's my point.
Right.
He knows that either something happened or nothing happened.
Right.
He knows that either Jim McNally stopped because he needed to use the bathroom for 1 minute and 40 seconds, or he stopped because he needed to take air out of the footballs.
Right.
One or the other happened, and the one thing I cannot imagine is that McNally did that without Brady knowing. If he did it, if he did take air out of the balls after the fact, that he would have done it without Brady knowing. So it's one of those two. If you're Brady and you know you didn't do anything wrong, I think you fight this to the very end, because I don't know that I agree that this won't affect – Golick is on your side, Jemele. I don't know that I agree that this won't affect him more from a legacy standpoint than people are suggesting. I mean, go ask Roger Clemens what it's like to be known as a cheater now. Are we putting those two on completely different planes?
I think most people probably would.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a more negative attitude toward performance-enhancing drugs than –
yes,
pounds per square inch, but I'm with you. This does tarnish his legacy to an extent. It doesn't make him less of a player, but this is on his resume.
Look, we got Marcellus Wiley saying he should have been suspended for a year. We got Bill Roden going on CBS this morning and saying he should have been suspended 8 games. We got people out there who were suggesting that this punishment, which I thought was extraordinarily too harsh.
I did too.
But nobody's
people saying they thought it was too little.
But nobody's knocked him off the QB Mount Rushmore that I've heard. But going back to the defense case does hold water, Your Honor. Okay. From this standpoint. Look, did you make it through the Wells Report rebuttal?
Yes, I absolutely did.
The rebuttal I'm talking about.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. There's enough holes poked in it to where, and I said this the other day, it might have been on your show. I think it was on your show, Mike. You weren't here. That's what it was.
Yeah, it was last Friday.
It was Ryan and Gold.
Yeah.
You can't completely dismiss nature and science as a possibility for the decrease in pounds per square inch. And until you can do that, until you can definitively say that the ideal gas law was not at play, you can't even move on to whether there was some kind of intricate plot to deflate the footballs in 1 minute and 40 seconds in the bathroom.
I'll take it a step farther.
There are too many flaws in the process.
I thought the Wells report vindicated the Patriots.
Really?
Yes.
No, I didn't think that. I read the Wells report and I was like, okay, they got him.
When I read the first words I read in that were more probable than not.
Yeah.
That he was at least generally aware.
That he was at least generally aware. That's like saying, man, I have no idea what happened. I mean, that's my standard.
But Ted Wells addressed that because that's the threshold.
I get it, but in this particular case, that's a ridiculous threshold. You spend millions of dollars and you're going to destroy the reputation of a guy who was otherwise considered one of the greatest players of all time, suspend him for a quarter of a season because you think it's more probable than not that he was generally aware?
Well, that's a Troy Vincent, Roger Goodell question. In terms of what Ted Wells wrote, and not to cape up for Ted Wells, in terms of what he wrote what he had to write according to the league's policy.
Right.
Which is more probable than not, because long ago they lowered it as, hey, when it comes to integrity or cheating, we don't have to have a smoking gun.
Listen,
to come down.
If you want to make an argument that he wrote it so that the league said to him, go find something that happened here, and he wrote it. No, but I am.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's the way it reads to me. We got to find something here. We can't conclude we don't know what happened.
Yes, you can. Wait, no, come on. Now, I hope you're not suggesting that the league wanted them to find a guilty verdict.
I don't know what happened, but what I know is that the notion that report, which I read every word of, and it was excruciating.
Yes.
I don't mean the context one, but the original one, led to the discipline that led to, I thought was ludicrous from the beginning.
Okay.
I remain flabbergasted.
So they overpunish is what you're saying.
Oh, my God.
And remember, that's the basis of their punishment. So that's why I'm with Greeny and thinking, like, if you're gonna punish somebody the way that they were punished, I know it's the threshold.
Yeah.
I'm going to need more than more probable.
I would have needed Tom Brady. I need Tom Brady to have already. This is the problem I have with this fight, because I said this when I was on the show last, Greeny, you weren't here. I'll say it for you. I don't know what to believe at this point. I'm comfortable saying that there are known knowns and there are known unknowns, but there's also unknown unknowns. And I don't know what I don't know at this point.
Right.
Okay, when it comes to this I'm past trying to find the truth. I don't want the truth. I can't handle it. I don't want it. In terms of the procedure, there are so many flaws in this until I feel much better about Tom Brady standing either in the appeal, albeit against a biased arbitrator in Roger Goodell. We know that situation. Or in court, I feel much better about it if he'd have provided the information that they wanted. Because the standing for the basis for the punishment is not just the Wells report, it's also the lack of cooperation.
Which also is subjective depending on where you fall with it.
So I'm just like, well, what would the punishment be had he cooperated fully in their minds to begin with? Would he have gotten 2 games to begin with? Would he have gotten 1 game? So now we're talking about maybe knocking it down to just a fine if he had come up off of the phone to begin with. A phone that in theory, or not the phone, information, printouts that in theory would have exonerated him if he's innocent? Like, don't do it now. Don't go to the appeal and give it to him.
But it's clear, and this seemed to be what the Patriots were unaware of or weren't thinking about, or it was clear that they planned to treat them as a repeat offender. And it seemed like everyone knew that but the Patriots.
Yeah, even Darrelle Revis.
Yeah, I mean, the Patriots were approaching this entire investigation and their cooperation in it as if they had nothing on their record. Now, I don't know why they would do that, and I think that's why they probably arrogantly took offense to some of the requests being made. As far as Tom Brady is concerned, he's thinking, I've never done anything, so no, you don't get to have my phone. I've answered all your questions all day. And that's why I said even the cooperation part is subjective.
Mike and Mike, we are thanking AutoZone for their support of our Mike and Mike experience at the ESPYs promotion. It's called The Zone. AutoZone will help you get there. I continue to say, because I just find it so astonishing, we had 4 winners, each with a guest going to the ESPYs. One of them was named Tom Brady. It's purely coincidental, but it is astonishing.
Appropriate.
It's got to be a strange name.
Tom Brady should be there.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and guess that the real one won't.
I have a suspicion. Exactly right. This one particular year, I have a feeling the actual Tom Brady one. The other part of this thing that I just don't get is how Roger Goodell is going to hear the appeal. Because let's just think this through. If he diminishes what happened, if he diminishes the punishment, it is his own office that did it. So here's the thing, okay? I'm just setting up a scenario in which, Michael, you can discipline Jemele for some grievance you have with her professionally.
I like it already.
Right? Okay. So you tell Jemele she's suspended for 3 days from the show because she took a ridiculous position on Steph Curry and it's indefensible, and she has no business whatsoever being on the air for 3 days.
Sounds good.
Okay? And then I come in there and I say, that's ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That's greatly overdone. And you say, you know what, on second thought, you're right, I'll make it 1 day. That's it. That's all that would happen if Roger Goodell is diminishing this. The notion that his name isn't on the original suspension to me is laughable. There's no way in the world to argue that. So what's he going to say a week later? Well, I changed my mind. There's no other way you can do that. And, I mean, the damage has already been done. So I don't understand.
So this doesn't end anywhere but in a courtroom is what you're saying?
Yeah, well, this is probably unfair for me to say, but I'll say it. If Brady doesn't take it to a courtroom, then it's going to change my perspective on what I think. Because if I'm Tom Brady and I think I didn't do anything wrong, heck yes.
I'm not sitting.
The system has been completely unfair to me, in my opinion, and I would take this as far as I have to take it, regardless of any cost or any other damage to my personal reputation.
Yeah, and people are already judging him when he didn't immediately sort of speak out in the wake of this. But I thought what Jonathan Vilma said was pretty on point. He said, look, lawyer up, fight it in court, and fight it as long as you have to. He did, and you see eventually that he was vindicated. Tom Brady needs to take the same play from that play.
His best play, their best play call. I'm no lawyer, but in this episode of Law and Order, Brady's intent, if his best option, their legal team's best option is to attack the procedure. Because if you go to court and you try to convince, I don't even think a judge is interested in whether or not you deflated the footballs or not. But buried in that Wells report rebuttal is the fact that it was the Colts equipment guy, an intern, as the Patriots refer to it, who took the ball that I think it was DeQuell Jackson intercepted, took the ball on the sideline and measured it and then turned it over to legal officials. According to the rules, which I'm getting from the rebuttal, nobody but the referee can test the pounds per square inch of the football. So if I were on Brady's legal team, and this is free advice from Michael Smith, if I were on Brady's legal team, that would be the first thing I'd point to, and I would say, case dismissed. Because this whole thing started This whole thing started from, apparently, the Colts breaking the rules, unless I'm missing something.
The whole thing is so completely ludicrous. Every once in a while, you find yourself saying, how is it worth? I would put the Riley Curry debate in the same category. We just need stuff to fight about now at this point. We can't come up with anything now that we can't get into an argument.
Robert Kraft was tired of it.
Right. We're talking about shrinkage at the end of the day.
Hashtag shrinkage.
Mike and Mike.
ESPN Radio, bringing you directly to the biggest events in sports.
Center field, well hit, Hunter back, out of here!
From opening day of baseball,
Throw to the plate, safe at the plate!
right through the World Series.
For the third time in 5 seasons, the San Francisco Giants are the champions of the baseball world.
Whether it's LeBron, Chris Paul, or Kevin Durant, when the NBA tips off, ESPN Radio is right there when a champion is crowned.
We have a new world champion. The San Antonio Spurs are the world champions.
And when the magic of bowl season arrives, ESPN Radio is your home for the new college football playoff.
The college football playoff first national champion, the Ohio State Buckeyes.
The biggest events in sports can be found right here on ESPN Radio. The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
We're having a lot of fun this morning, reminiscing about our times on and with David Letterman, and, of course, all the sports news of the day. We're Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance, our guests on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, and now we're taking this to another level. So his and hers are here this morning. Jemele Hill, Michael Smith, his and hers every weekday, noon Eastern on ESPN2, and the three of us have been together all morning, and we are now joined by one of the absolute brightest minds in the world of basketball, one of the top young coaches, top coaches, period, I think, in the sport now. The last couple of years, coach of the Boston Celtics, Brad Stevens, is going to host with us for the final 2 hours. Brad, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. Great to be here.
It's great to have him. We were just reminiscing. The last time I think that you and I were together was at Dick Vitale's gala. You want to tell the story? Or want me to tell it?
Go ahead. It's kind of embarrassing for me.
It felt like he thinks that it was hazing. I don't know. So if you go to Dickie V's event, which is a magnificent event, they just had another one this year. He raises millions and millions of dollars. But the one year that I was there, I hosted, I introduced Dick, and we were going through the evening. And the big moment of the evening, they bring out all these basketballs. Every celebrity who's there, and it's like 1 million basketball coaches, all sign a ball, and they bring out the basketballs to put them, give one to each table. So this was the first year that you guys made the championship game.
It was.
The first of your back-to-back years with Butler. So Brad Stevens was like the hot young name in all of coaching. So they bring him out onto the stage, and whatever it was, you said a few words, and your big moment was you're supposed to say...
I think all I was told to say at all was bring out the balls.
Bring out the balls, which is an odd thing to say anyway. And then literally nothing happened. Someone missed a cue. I don't know what happened. The pause between you saying that...
It was awkward.
You could have driven a truck through it, right? It felt like it went on forever. And I was sitting with my wife, Stacey, and we were like, oh, God, someone get Brad Stevens a cup of coffee or something. It was, but I mean, that was, I think, the only time you and I have ever been in the same room.
And for all of us first-timers there, we were all kind of waiting for what's next, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, everybody else was used to it. But what a great event. I mean, I think I read today that he raised $2.4 million again.
Yeah.
At that singular event, intact. And I hate to go off on a soapbox on this, but every year he would invite or call after the college season. He would push you to come, which was, you always wanted to be there. But I remember telling him certain stories about certain kids that we knew, and he got them involved in the event. I mean, it was just an incredible thing. So happy that they continue to do it. So happy that they continue to raise the money they do.
It's the best. I mean, and no, I've said it before. I'll say it again. No one does more for the charity they believe in than Dick Vitale does for the V Foundation. Anyway, we're going to take your questions all morning long using the hashtag AskBrad. Tweet them at us at Mike and Mike. Use the hashtag AskBrad, and we will bring your questions to Brad Stevens as the four of us sit up here. Let's get into a little bit of basketball. And let's start with this. We were just bemoaning the state of the dropping like flies nature of this basketball postseason. Kevin Love, Mike Conley, Kyrie Irving, Tony Allen, Pau Gasol, John Wall, Chris Paul, Chandler Parsons, Dwight Howard, and now Jamari Carroll goes down last night with what looked like a knee. Now, Jemele and I were discussing, is this a coincidence, or is there something going on here that you see that is leading to this epidemic of injuries?
You know, in my 2 years in the NBA, I feel like there's been a lot of injuries, period. You know, I think even if you go back to the regular season this year, and, you know, I've looked at it, we played against Oklahoma City 4 times because we play the West twice a year. We played against Westbrook once. We played against Durant once. We played against Kobe 1 time in my 4 times playing against him. You know, you've got all of these things that are happening throughout the NBA throughout the year, and I think it is, to me, it would be a coincidence because I've never been around a group of athletes that takes better care of their bodies, that prioritizes sleep better, that gets in the gym 2 hours before for all the injury prevention, maintenance, you know, flexibility work, all of those things, and you know, it's unfortunate. It talks about the importance of depth in this playoffs. There's no question about it.
Now, is there something to be said, because especially since you've coached at both levels in college and in pro, it seems to me that in high school that athletes now, basketball players, are playing way more games because of AAU. So you go through a ridiculous AAU kind of circuit, then you have your regular high school season. Then it seems like by the time they get to college, they played a lot of basketball. Am I misreading that, or do you think that might be part of the issue too?
You know, I don't know how different the impact on your body is, though, because they're playing games all across the country, whereas when we grew up, maybe we were playing out at the park or playing on asphalt, you know, all day long. So I don't know the difference in the impact on the bodies. I do know that there are a ton of games that guys are playing. Even when I was playing summer basketball in the early 90s, you didn't play 60 games spring and summer. You may have played in a couple of tournaments that you had to qualify for, and that was about it. It wasn't near what it is now. But certainly it's something worth looking at, something that people are talking about. I mean, the 82-game schedule is a monster in and of itself. And, you know, clearly there are going to be nicks and bruises, but everybody's dealing with those. But the number of significant injuries is certainly, you know, it's impacting the playoffs. There's no question about it.
Phil Jackson just made some waves on Twitter with asking how the best three-point shooting teams were going. A little typo there, but how they were doing in the playoffs when they were down 2-1. And you're seen as a very progressive guy. You embrace analytics. You know, you have the Warriors, you have the Rockets, you have the Cavs and the Hawks. What does that Final Four, their participation and the way they approach the game, what, if anything, does it say about the state of the game or the evolution of the game, where it's headed?
Well, obviously, again, I think you have to look at it and say, okay, you know, are the Thunder potentially one of those 4 if Durant stays healthy, Westbrook's healthy all year? You've got other factors that play in the whole year.
Okay.
There's no question that if you have a great 2-point scorer a la Shaq, somebody like that, you want to feed them as much as humanly possible. There's just not a lot of guys like that. And the guys that are so skilled now at 1 through 4 positions, sometimes 1 through 5 positions, the way that they can stretch the floor, the challenge that they put on you to guard them. You look at I look at the Cavs. You're in such a predicament because, and we played them for the playoffs in the first 4 games. Do you come at LeBron with 2? When do you bring the second guy to LeBron? Well, they've got a terrific couple of rebounders, and I think Tristan Thompson has really elevated that team, let alone the game, as his game in the playoffs. But then they've got the shooters spacing the floor, and that is a real tough spot to be in because at the very least you've got to rotate, make sure you cover those dunkers down there, get back out to the shooters. Well, then you're flying back into rebound position, which he's going to win, and those are issues. And I think just the ability to shoot the basketball makes everybody better. And then the great players, you know, that just brings out the best in everyone.
I'm glad that you have expounded on the defensive challenges in the NBA, because here's a fight that I get into with college basketball fans all the time. That was probably my favorite sport, next to baseball. Baseball was my first love. College basketball was a close second. And college basketball fans, whenever they rip on the NBA, they always talk about, well, nobody plays defense and this and that. I think it's because the NBA players are so good, they make it look easy. And for you to have this perspective of doing it at both levels, just can you put into words or describe the different defensive challenges when you have to play guys one-on-one, when you're dealing with a LeBron James versus what you had to face in college and stopping a guy?
Well, it's interesting. One of the big differences about coaching in college versus the NBA is you could coach against 3 different styles in a week in college. You could play against a zone team, you could play against a man-to-man pressure team, you could play against a team that plays man-to-man in the half court, and you could do that every other week. So you're always changing, you're always adding and adjusting. Here it's more you're adjusting to 30 similar teams, not necessarily always doing the same thing. Certainly there's tweaks and adjustments that every team makes, but these players are so good that they expose you if you overhelp. They expose you if you're in the wrong position, and they'll expose you every single time. I think that we've got some of or a couple of the elite, especially perimeter defenders in the NBA right now. But still, when you get against those great offensive players and you're forced to make a decision, do you guard them in isolation? Do you bring 2 to them? And this is why the ball screens are so much a big part of the game, because when these guys come off the pick and rolls almost all the time, you have to at least bring 2 to them at some level. You either drop them or you bring them up high, and that makes it really difficult. And that's why with shooting and spacing the floor, those guys are so effective.
Mike Brad Stevens is here, head coach of the Celtics, who, by the way, attempted over 2,000 threes this year, just the second time in franchise history. So you have sort of embraced.
I didn't know that.
So you're going to learn
all
a lot
over it.
being here today. We're going to learn from you, and you're going to learn from us. You mentioned that you played the Cavs in the first round of the playoffs. Now, in the last game there, unfortunately, they lose Kevin Love, and that's part of the narrative here, is that Kyrie Irving is limping and Kevin Love is not there. And the feeling is that LeBron can still will/carry that team all the way to the finals. So let's talk about LeBron for a minute. You play against him in a playoff series. So rather than it's a Tuesday night and we have second of back-to-backs, you had time to prepare, study film, do nothing but think about what you're going to do with LeBron James.
I did a good job, huh?
Well,
thanks.
That's the point.
We have gentlemen sweeps, but you guys, that was a heck of a...
We played well. The one thing that stands out about LeBron, right, is his physical dominance. His skill level is incredible. His vision is incredible. Maybe just as incredible as his mental game and his emotional game. So he reads what's going on. He knows what's going on. If you bring him the same look for 4 straight games, you're in trouble. If you bring him the same look for a whole game, you're in trouble. And he responds to good and bad things throughout the game with the best of them. And so he's a real problem, obviously.
That's the mental game. What do you mean by the emotional game?
I don't think he gets too high or too low. Like he can have a wave of things go against him or his team, and he can take it to a different level and it not affect him. He can also have great success, and he can continue having great success. He can figure out how he wants to attack certain people, and he stays with it. He obviously has a great physical presence, and there's no denying that. But he is emotionally as strong and mentally as strong as any player I've been around.
Well, isn't that fascinating, guys, to hear him say that? Because, what was the lone knock on LeBron James for the longest time would have been 180 degrees away from what he's saying there.
Absolutely.
That's what I've seen in my time.
Well, and you could tell just at the end of the game, and again, we got to find a term for a sweep like you guys experienced, because really, everybody was impressed with the performance your team put forth, the effort you guys gave. But you could tell when LeBron talked about you that there was a serious respect. He talked about how well coached and well prepared the Celtics were. As much as you can give us, what would you say you did, relatively speaking, of course, that gave LeBron perhaps the most trouble? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I go back to what killed us in that series, and obviously you always have a margin that you're working with regard to your margin for error. But I thought what killed us in that series was we had some transition lapses early in the series, but then the biggest separator was just the defensive glass. So we couldn't do both, or we didn't do both. And I was really down about it until I've watched Tristan Thompson and Mozgov do what they've done in the last 2 series.
So it's not
already.
Just you.
So it's not just us.
Right.
But I think what we tried to do is we just tried to bring him different looks. Obviously, the more guys that you can have that you can match up with him individually, the better. If Carroll is hurt, that's a problem moving forward. I actually thought that Millsap did a really good job on him for the most part. Obviously, he got driven by on that last play, but for the most part, I think there were 5 or 6 possessions in a row where he made it really difficult. So there's a physical element that you have to being able to guard him, and Millsap has that ability, and then there's a quickness element that a lot of guards have, but not a lot of guys have both. Not a lot of teams have more than a couple of guys. Yeah. So you got to bring a couple of guys to them.
It's interesting that, excuse me, I'm sorry, Greg. Interesting that you said earlier that Tristan Thompson has elevated their team.
I think so.
Well, you guys are responsible for that because he wouldn't have been the starting lineup if not for what unfortunately happened in that series. Everybody had an opinion about the Olynyk and Kevin Love encounter. From your perspective, how did you see it? Is this Kelly Olynyk? Is that really just how he plays? It didn't look like a natural basketball play to a lot of people.
So the way, first of all, you want Kevin to get back as quick as possible, and nobody wants to see him get hurt. There's no doubt about that. And the way that the benefit that I have is that I'm around Kelly every day, and I know him personally. I know what kind of guy he is, and I 100% believe that he had no intent to harm Kevin Love. I just absolutely can't imagine that. And certainly it was a play where even Kelly has said that he tried to pull him away from the ball.
Right.
But as far as injuring him, I don't have any doubt that, Kelly didn't have those intentions.
Is that how he is in practice? His teammates were saying that they were all
I think he gets tangled up. I think he gets tangled up. And if you look across the playoffs, there's a lot of tangling up. There's a lot of times where arms get entangled. Again, it was a really unfortunate play because nobody wants to see Kevin Love out, and Kevin had played great throughout our series. His ability to stretch the floor was a big deal. Now, the way that they're playing now, they're playing guys that stretch the floor, but they don't have his ability to score in the post or maybe add another rebounder and skilled guy from that aspect. But Tristan was hurting us off the bench regardless, and he was one of the difference makers in our series before he started.
So what do you do when, and Mike Brad Stevens is here, coach of the Celtics, his Subway Fresh Take were presented by Progressive Insurance. So you got a night like last night where LeBron, he needs a running mate, right? I mean, Kyrie Irving is such a shell of himself right now. Love, as you know, as we just discussed, is not there. He needs somebody to help him out, and J.R. Smith just goes nuts, and he's one of these guys who can do it. You're talking about step-back contested threes, and he's making them look easy. So, and now you're a coach, you're seeing him go off that way. What are you going to do about J.R. Smith?
So when you're a coach, the interesting part is you prepare for the best players and the best teams by looking at their averages and playing the percentages. You prepare for the role players by looking at what they're capable of. Because that scares you, right? And we all know from watching J.R. Smith that when J.R. Smith gets going, it's over. Like, he makes shots that hardly anybody makes at the two-guard spot in the league. So you really have to try to make it as tough as possible. That's a lot easier said than done. Some of the stuff he hit last night, what are you going to do? Now, Shumpert's had moments like that, too. And then Dellavedova goes nuts in the last game of the Bulls series. I'd be really concerned if I were them with Irving, because Irving certainly doesn't look the same to me. But those other guys have really stepped up. And I do think it's a credit not only to those guys, but that coaching staff, just that environment, that they're all ready, and they are all elevating their games. And obviously a huge part of that is the attention you have to pay to LeBron.
Clearly you're watching a lot of these games closely. How much do you glean from what you're seeing from the opposition, from the playoffs? And we know that the regular season and playoffs are different, but are you picking up things that you can take in the next season when you see the Cavaliers again or see some of these other teams?
Well, the other biggest difference from college is this is what I do now, right?
Yeah.
I act like it's my job that I watch basketball, and I act like it's really hard to do, right? It's really stressful and taxing. But no, so I look at our stuff and review our season, and we're deep into analysis of our year right now. But that only lasts a few hours of the day, and then you watch the playoff games. I have them on my computer the day after they're done, and so you can pull back up clips you want to watch, pull up different ways that people are doing things. So, yeah, you're just studying.
So what you're saying when you say this is your only job right now, if you're back in your college days, you would be recruiting right now. That is what you're saying. That would be the other part of the job.
I think one of the huge differences is that you're way more focused just on the technical aspects of the game, because not because you don't want to be in college, but because that's what you have time to do. And even in college right now, your guys would just be coming back for summer school. Now the NCAA's got 8 hours of workouts a week for 8 weeks in the summer, so you're always on, including the recruiting, including the talks and all of those other things that go with it. Here there's a little bit more time to go back, reflect, review, and analyze. one of the things that I've always liked to do is I like to review a season right after it's over to get my best idea of how we want to do things in the future, because otherwise I can't operate. Like, I can't function thinking about, well, I got all this thinking to do in August and September. I want to be thinking about what I want to do now because it's fresh in my mind, and then gives you a good basis moving forward. And it's a good time to evaluate your team because you're not doing it with a lot of emotions, because you're not playing a game every night.
One of the things, the observation I made watching your team play, and I don't want you to have to comment on whether you agree with my assessment, but just in a bigger picture, I said the Boston Celtics have a lot of really good players. To win a championship in the NBA, you need at least one great one. You need like a transcendent one. We've seen very few. I mean, you're a Pistons fan. 2004 is the year everyone looks back on and points at that team. Chauncey Billups, probably the best player. Not a transcendent Hall of Fame immortal kind of player. Do you believe that to be a championship contender in the NBA, you need to have that guy, at least one guy like that?
Well, I think clearly it helps, right? Because you have the guy, again, that you're paying so much attention to, whether it's LeBron off the lane, LeBron and ISO on the wing, LeBron on the post, whether it's Curry coming off high pick and rolls, whether it's Thompson coming off of a pin down, whether it's, Harden, whatever the case may be, that's a real positive because it elevates everybody else. Now, we've seen other, quote, star players that don't elevate everybody else. And I don't think that, I think that there's something, that's probably a little overrated to that. But I think if you can elevate everybody else and you can demand that attention and you can make basketball plays and you can lift others up, then clearly you have an advantage. But you're right. I think we've got really good players. And, I'm looking forward to watching them get better. And, hopefully a couple of those guys end up being guys that, demand that kind of attention.
All right, Mike and Mike, Brad Stevens is here. We're going to take your Twitter questions for him using the hashtag AskBrad. We'll talk a bunch of basketball. Plus, he's a kid from a small town in Indiana. Yeah. Another kid from a small town in Indiana had a big night last night. He's someone you know. You were a guest on that show. Your thoughts on David Letterman as well from Brad Stevens.
The best of Mike and Mike.
For those of you just joining us, His and Hers are here. Jemele and Michael from His and Hers on ESPN2, and Brad Stevens, the head coach of the Boston Celtics. And we are taking your questions for Brad on Twitter using the hashtag AskBrad. It's next question brought to you by O'Reilly Auto Parts, better prices every day. So I'm just going to go through a bunch of these guys. If you picked out some that you like, and we'll just go through some of these Twitter questions we got for Brad that we liked a lot. Here's one I particularly like. I can't say the Twitter handle on the air.
Don't you love that? You got to watch those retweets nowadays, too.
But I do like the question, which is, how does it feel to be younger than Tim Duncan? And all seriousness, there are 3 NBA players who are older than you are. How challenging was that when you walked in the door, not only that you were a college guy and had never been an NBA head coach before, but you were how old are you now?
38.
38. I mean, you walk in there at 36 years old. How did you present yourself to everybody and say, yes, I'm 36 years old, but here's why you should be willing to follow me?
The age wasn't as much of an issue as the lack of NBA experience. I think that was probably a bigger issue. But these guys in Boston, everybody that we've had on our team, which is like 4 teams worth of players in the last 2 years, have really treated me great from the get-go. And it was a major adjustment for me, especially from a schedule standpoint. Adjusting to the lack of practice time and the way more games and travel, but certainly all of the players have been really good to me, and so that's made my adjustment a lot easier. Age, I've never really considered age a big factor in it. I was fortunate to get my first head coaching job at 30. We had an average starting lineup age of 23, and I remember I just brought those guys in and I said, hey, here's the deal, as much as I do. And there's going to be things that we don't agree with, but you have to act like I know what I'm talking about, so the freshmen think I know what I'm saying. And those guys tricked the freshmen, and we were able to go from there.
I can repeat this Twitter handle. Famous FAMOS 625. He wants to know, do you think staying in college is a better benefit for the transition into the NBA than early entries?
Well, I don't think there's any question that the older you are, the more mature you are, the stronger you are, the better you are, the better transition you'll make. But I also understand that when you're young and your ceiling is what these guys' ceiling, then you have to make that jump from a financial perspective, and that totally makes sense. But there's no question that if a guy stays 4 years and he's able to stay healthy, and then he's able to come out, he's going to be more prepared.
Can I follow up on that quickly, Michael, before we
go
get
right
to
in.
yours? Here's the question I've had on that for a long time. You just talked about how once you get to the NBA as a coach, your entire life can revolve around basketball. If you are a player, I have to believe it's the same thing. So now I'm a college kid. I've played 1 year in college. 3 years from now, am I going to be a better player by having stayed in college, playing fewer games, working fewer hours, having other responsibilities that I have to deal with, school and all the rest of that, or going to the NBA, maybe not being as good at 19 as I'm going to be at 22, but working on nothing but my basketball and learning what it takes to be a professional for those 3 years? I don't understand why the notion that staying in college is going to make these kids better in the long run.
Well, maybe not in the long run. I agree with that. I think I was talking more about, are they more prepared out of the gate?
Well, obviously,
to play?
that goes without
that's
saying.
clear because they're older and they're better. But in the long run, certainly, the more time that you can spend, if you come in at 19, you're going to be more prepared to play in the NBA at 24, 25, 26, if you can handle that transition at 19.
So that's the scary part. I'm trying to figure out what the downside is. What you're saying is that maybe you get eaten alive.
One of the things and we had our interviews in Chicago last week at the Combine, and we interviewed 18 guys, and a pretty consistent question is, do you understand how hard this is going to be? It's a hard transition. 82 games in and of itself is a monster.
What's the hardest part?
Are you asking that rhetorically? Do they know it? Do these kids have any idea?
No, and I'll tell you what was really impressive is how mature these guys are and how good they are in the interviews. I mean, I was really blown away. I thought the guys that we talked to were just outstanding. But I think that they may have an idea, like I had an idea, but it's different and it's really difficult. And hey, we had a 19-year-old this year in James Young, who we think is going to be a fantastic player, whose work ethic is good, who comes to the gym every day, who's getting better, and he didn't always get that validation of how much better he's getting by playing time. And that's a hard position to be in because, you're going through the mundaneness of everyday work and not getting the reward of playing time. But, ultimately over the course of time, he certainly is going to be ready sooner rather than later.
All right, we're Mike and Mike. We got Brad Stevens here. I got to take a quick break. We'll come back. More of your questions using the hashtag AskBrad through the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. Surprise someone special with a gift just because from 1-800-Flowers.com. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN for exclusive offers. We'll also get Brad's reminiscences of his time growing up as a fan of David Letterman, then appearing on the Letterman Show, and more of our thoughts on Dave's last show last night.
Mike and Mike.
My wife Stacy's been digging through a bunch of stuff, with this being the Letterman week, and she came across something I had completely forgotten. She came to one of our appearances, this is years ago, and on her phone shot a behind-the-scenes video of us at Letterman, of Mike and me in the dressing room, our agent, the producer Brian Tata, everyone but Dave, and just sort of a real behind-the-scenes look at what it is like to be a guest on the David Letterman Show, and ESPN made a really nice piece of it, so she just reposted that. So if you're interested in seeing it, it's on Twitter. It's at StacyGSG, and it's the best look I can give you of what it's like to be there, including Golik's favorite part, which is the cookies. So if you're interested in seeing that, you can see that. You were on, how many times were you on the Letterman Show?
I was on once.
And what was, that was after?
And I didn't go. I was called, and in fact, our phone started ringing at my house. Somehow they're so good. They get your home number, and at 5 a.m. the day after the Duke game. And so we had just gone to bed. We got home at about, 3, or we got home, and I actually rewatched the game, fell asleep at about 4 or so, and then the phone started ringing at 5. And so we were on. I was actually taped from Indianapolis that afternoon.
Okay, so you didn't get the cookies. What was that like for you, though? I mean, were you a fan of Letterman?
Yeah, I mean, everybody was a fan of Letterman, right? And the top 10 last night was unbelievable. Yeah. I thought that was fantastic. But I have so many people that are connected to him, either went to college with him or knew him from growing up in Broad Ripple, or the funniest connection is that I think, if I'm being told the truth, so I have to put that caveat on this, but his parents were florists, and my in-laws, my father-in-law is a florist, and they've owned the flower shop for years and years and years. And so when the Lettermans drove through Cleveland, they actually stopped at at my father-in-law when he was a kid, and David and him shared a room. And he said he tried to get him to talk, and David didn't have much to say, and then he turns on the TV for the last 30 years, and he's killing it late night. So, but there's so many. He's been great to the city of Indianapolis. He was great to Ball State. You see him at the track. I'm not surprised that this is his last show with Indy 500 this weekend. He's probably needs a couple of days to get ready. Yeah, and you know he'll probably be on the track on Sunday.
And we were making the comparisons earlier, guys. I'm sorry, Michael and Jemele, too. We see this in sports a lot. Because the shelf life of an athlete is so much shorter than that of an entertainer like David Letterman or practically anybody else. We have these big emotional send-offs. I mean, Mariano Rivera, Derek Jeter, we just lived through this, and it happens, it feels like every 2 or 3 years in sports, we're saying an emotional goodbye to someone. Someone like David Letterman, that's once in a generation.
Yeah, it is. The only thing, I was trying to think of something entertainment-wise that would compare for me. Like, I remember when the Cosby Show went off air.
Yeah. Fresh Prince,
we were just talking about
19
years ago yesterday, the final episode. And so it seems like with sitcoms and shows, I get that feeling quite a bit. I do think that in sports, and I mentioned this before, and I'll reiterate, is that there's not a lot of opportunities that we have. Mariano Rivera was an exception, and to some degree, Derek Jeter, even though he was not clearly the same Derek Jeter that we'd all kind of seen throughout his career, but they just so often just don't go out on that winning script or in a way that is befitting of the kind of career that they have.
Or even with the same team.
Or even, I mean, it's just, as a 49er fan, Joe Montana, the fact that he was the Chief just disturbs me now in my soul even still. So because of that, I think the connection is at least a little bit different for me as opposed to Dave Letterman, who consistently was in your home late night. You could depend on it and count on it and set your watch to it. That's a lot different.
Brad, you referenced getting the call after the Duke game. How often do you think about that game even today? Gordon Hayward's shot.
No more than every day. No, I was raised as a coach by the people that I looked up to, that I got a chance to learn from, to just, you move on to the next day, you do the very best to be excellent on the next day. And so really didn't do a lot of looking back. And, the one thing about that game and the next year against Connecticut, we just couldn't throw the ball in the ocean on one night. But I had no regrets from our approach, the guys we had, the way they played. And none of them should. I know Gordon has actually written about how much he regrets the shot before the half-court shot. And, we talked about it after our game at our place this year. He hits the exact same shot to almost beat us, and we ended up winning at the end. But he has actually talked about that, and there's nothing more he could have done for anybody. He was unbelievable.
Let me remind everyone, for those who don't know what we're referencing, Butler, coached by Brad Stevens, made back-to-back national championship games. The first one, you played mighty Duke, and you had a half-court shot in the air that looked good every inch of the way that would have won the game, because Mike Krzyzewski, and here's the beauty of being a talk show host, I've been criticizing him for this, including in conversations with him, for 5 years for a game in which he won the national championship, but they intentionally missed a free throw before that left it a 2-point game. And for the life of me, he said that he intentionally misses the foul shot because otherwise the action is going to stop and you're going to have a chance to set up some sort of play. Now, I don't remember exactly how many seconds were left, but there were very few.
3 point something.
3 seconds. And they can make a foul shot to make it a 3-point game. So the worst they can do is tie you. Instead, they intentionally miss. You've got to run it up. Yes, it's a heave, but, I mean, it is going in every inch of the way. If that thing goes in, you beat them because they intentionally miss a free throw. I will never, ever, ever agree with Mike Krzyzewski that it was the right thing to do. We've had this argument a million times.
I admire your moxie that you would sit there and argue with a Hall of Fame caliber coach.
But I'm right. Am I not right?
It's not like he lost.
Well, that was the thing. We had Calipari on the next day, and Calipari's like, listen to you crushed this guy, and they lose. I said, listen, and they won, and I'm still criticizing him. But it was the wrong thing. Come on, the circumstances being the circumstances. Michael, are you intentionally missing a foul shot?
Hey, man. That's you by yourself questioning Coach K.
No. I am questioning Coach K. Look, he's a great coach. He's not perfect.
Hey, it worked out. Let's just say it worked out.
It was this close to not working out. Yeah, it didn't work out for Brad so well over here. But actually it did, because that shot would win you the game. Now, tell me, would you rather have Let's go back. Now you can tell me I'm wrong. Which would you rather have? Would you rather have 3 seconds and a stoppage down 3? Or would you rather get a rebound with 3 seconds running it up down 2?
I think in an ideal world, you'd rather have a stoppage. So you'd rather have that stoppage.
Yeah.
But that is so that you can get the ball to your best player flying down the court, and we were lucky enough to get that. So we kind of had we were lucky that Hayward got it without much interruption, and then Howard actually got him open. But it just didn't go in.
I'm sorry I asked.
But you know what? But you know what? They won by 2. It was the right call.
How much do you think about it,
Sometimes you do the wrong thing and it winds up winning. You can stick on 16 against the 6 and win. It doesn't mean you did the right thing.
That's how good Duke is. Right. They get criticized for winning by 2.
I will explain basketball to this Krzyzewski guy at some point soon.
Mike and Mike.
It was briefly called D's Notes.
Brilliant, Greenie. Brilliant. You shouldn't have let the people talk you out of it.
It was met with some negative feedback that I didn't like, so we changed it back to Nerd Notes. And you seem to me to be one of these
nerds
guys. Well, I wasn't going to say it, but what I do like about you, and what I do like about sort of the younger generation of basketball people and people in all sports really, is that you embrace these numbers rather than scoffing at them. I get so frustrated.
Because they never lie.
When ball plays, the numbers never lie, which is obviously a phrase that you two guys are intimately familiar with from days gone by. But even more significantly, the analytics, the numbers, they are actual evidence of what has happened. They're not a guess. They're not an opinion. They are what happened. Now, they aren't necessarily a definitive answer as to what will happen. But there is no better predictor of what will happen in the future than what has happened in the past. That's just logic. I'm not making things up. These are not opinions. This is a statement of fact. So for today's intelligence, for today's Nerd Notes, I would like to ask you, what numbers do you look at in your job, in your life as a basketball person? What are the most significant analytics that you deal in?
20 to 25 pages of notes before every opponent that you play, your own stuff daily. There's all kinds of stuff. I don't even know where to start. I do believe this. I think numbers, the new phrase analytics, which I heard Coach Thibodeau one time say, we used to call those statistics, and people have been using it for a long, long time, probably more and more talked about in the mainstream now. I think that those can help you put you over the top. They can help you figure out a way to get 5 points here, 2 points here, stop the other team from getting 2 points based on knowing a guy drives left, drives right, likes the right block, left block, whatever the case may be, whatever you've decided to study and analyze. I don't think it's more important than chemistry. I don't think it's more important than team. I don't think it's more important than grit. But I think it can help you get you over the top, and you have to have all that other stuff. And then these things are really important as far as, gaining an advantage here or there.
I suppose, I'm sure you've noticed the tension between, obviously, people who embrace analytics and people like Charles Barkley who think that they're sort of worthless, and there's sort of this old school, new school thing kind of happening. But as somebody who's kind of in between, I agree with you. I think analytics can certainly give you that little bit of edge. But then there's also things that I see that kind of drive me crazy. Like, I couldn't help but notice, and this is not necessarily a new trend, but nowadays it still trips me out when I see guys on the break just pull up from 3, as opposed to you see that a lot now in the NBA. Like, I get it for Steph Curry does it, right? But they could have it could be just one defender back, or they might even have the advantage on the break and they just pull up and shoot a 3. And so I guess what I'm asking you is the 3-point shot, has it really become the most important shot, so to speak, in basketball?
No shot's better than a layup.
Okay.
No shot's better than an uncontested layup. You look at the Golden State's run in the last 7 minutes of that second quarter the other day. I think they had, 6, 7, 8 layups, maybe 1 3, and then a long 2 by Curry at the very end of the half. That's it. But it was all getting to the rim, and it was Livingston, and it was Thompson, and it was Azili. It was just over and over and over. Nothing beats that. But what happens then is you have a lot of congestion because everybody is concerned about the rim, and now you get an open shot, and the argument is an open 20-footer as good as the open 22-footer, and the numbers would suggest that's not the case because of the 3-point shot and the percentages and how they play out. Now the game has changed as such that now there's so many more opportunities at the rim because you're more worried about the three-point line because of those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where that's the great dynamic right now with all these spread teams.
Well, let's just be logical, right, Michael? Here's the layup. Taking it to the basket is better for two reasons. One, you're going to hit 75 to 80% of that. So if in order for a 2-point shot to be better than a 3-point shot, you have to make it 150% of the time more often, or however I'm phrasing that, then you make the 2-point shot. The layup, you are. The dunk,
the open
you
layup.
are. Yeah. And the other thing that can happen, though, with a non-open layup is that you might draw fouls, and that is also beneficial to you. So that changes the dynamic as well. If you might get an opposing player in some kind of foul trouble, so that's helping you in other greater ways. So taking it to the basket, yes. But any other shot that you don't make 150% of the time that you're making a 3, just by definition, isn't as good a shot.
Well, yeah.
That's just a statistical number.
Somewhere Daryl Morey and James Harden are smiling right now.
Yeah.
Don't take mid-range or long twos.
But when the going got really tough and they went on their run late, James Harden hit a bunch of
mid-range
tough contested twos because that's what was given.
Yeah,
that's what they were defending. The defenses are smart too. Defenses are guarding the 3-point line and protecting the rim. And I think that's where, at the end of games especially, you see a lot of these contested twos are the shots you're getting. Mm-hmm. And that's why the James Hardens of the world, are so important.
We'll make those our nerd notes today, again, courtesy of Brad. Today's intelligence brought to you by Castrol GTX.
I'm honored.
Magnatech Motor Oil.
I always have that segment, by the way, and anything I do, I always get asked, about being a nerd or whatever the case may be. It must be my thing.
I can relate.
Okay, good.
I can relate. So,
I'm okay with that. I like it.
Hey, man, I've long since embraced it. I just want to sink this in because so many things we could ask you. I just don't want to get too far off because we were talking about what adjustments Houston needed to make if Dwight is out or, in fact, limited. And we saw the success that Golden State had going to that small ball lineup as they have all year with Draymond at the 5.
The bear.
If you were in Kevin McHale's shoes, if you wouldn't mind, what advice would you give him on how to adjust to maybe slow down Golden State?
Don't get a 16-point lead so they go small. Here's what happened. We had a 26-point lead on Golden State. And we played the best we played all year for 2 quarters of a game. And they went to that lineup. And it was a monster. And what made it that way is Green is so strong that he can push the post catch out. And then I talked about this earlier. They're comfortable flying around. They're comfortable doubling the post. They're comfortable reading the play. Their savvy is high. You put Curry, Thompson, Sean Livingston, Iguodala, Draymond Green. You put those guys all on the court. Those are a bunch of smart basketball players. And they really know where to be. They know how to read what's next. They're not afraid to take risks, and at the same time, they're smart about it. It's a tough lineup to play against. And right now, if I'm sitting and evaluating that series, Steve Kerr always knows that if things aren't going well, that's what he can try. Doesn't mean it'll work again, because the one thing that I think Houston does have that, regardless if Howard plays or not, is great versatility. With Brewer and Smith and Harden's a big guard. People don't realize how big and strong James Harden is until they stand next to him.
Mike and Mike, Brad Stevens here. So let me that dovetails perfectly to what I was going to bring up next anyway, which is we're talking about evaluating talent and analytical study of players and the evolution of the sport. The first 2 picks in this year's draft are going to be the big men, right? Karl Anthony Towns and Jahlil Okafor. I maintain that is habit. Because if I had to bet on it right now, I would bet that when we look back on the draft of 2015, neither one of those 2 guys are going to be the player we say was the best player in this draft. Now, I can't tell you who it's going to be, so it's probably a safer bet to take one of the big guys. But between Emmanuel Mudiay and D'Angelo Russell and the kid I love, Justice Winslow, and all these other players, because they play the game more the way the game is currently played, my guess is they're going to be the most impactful players. So my question to you, Brad, and we can open it up to a bigger discussion, is, with the way the game has changed, there's always been the default. You take the big guy. We took Greg Oden ahead of Kevin Durant. You took Sam Bowie ahead of Michael Jordan, because if he's 7 feet tall, you take him. Has the game changed enough where you think that mentality in general will change?
I still think most teams play in some teams play with a traditional 2 big lineup. You look at Memphis with Randolph and Gasol. You look at the Pacers when they had George, were really effective, right, with a more traditional lineup. Although West can really stretch it, and sometimes to the 3, but mostly the long 2. But I think that those guys will be really coveted because obviously they have great talent, but there aren't a lot of guys that size in the world, let alone that are that good and that mobile and have that ability to impact the game. And I think then the question is who are you more likely to get down the road, or who are you more likely to fill your team with and down the road? And that is a smaller guy or a point guard or a wing or a true 7-footer with great ability. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's a tough decision. I think certainly at the end of the day, there's an argument to be made either way.
Well, and there is certainly, because here's the other part of that too, is okay, you may take the big guy, but what does the big guy become as a result of how the league and how the game is played? Because Anthony Davis, he's a hybrid. I don't know what he is. But
he's ridiculous.
He's ridiculous. Yes, I do know that. That's the proper term for him. So you may take them with the intention, like this guy could be a post guy, but as we've seen evolve in the NBA for years now, is that big guys, they know how to shoot. They're shooting threes now. So they're sort of melding their skills in with the overall game. But it would seem to me that you would be better off taking a wing, only because you see a Memphis a few times a season, and obviously playing in a conference that's a little bit different. But still, you see those big guys here and there. And if the league is not littered with them, and Mike and I discussed this on our show, is maybe in a weird way, is Houston, if Dwight Howard isn't able to be his normal healthy self, or if he's limited in terms of the number of games he plays in this series, are they better off just playing the style that Golden State is playing, even though Golden State does it better? That to some degree you can argue that Dwight Howard was slowing them down in a sense. So that kind of gets all back into how the game is going. And I don't know. Look, when I came of age as an NBA fan, it was all about taking the center and post play, and it was a very traditional game. But I don't know that I like a NBA game where you sort of phased out the center, if you know what I mean.
So I think Houston's better with Dwight Howard. There's no question about that. But Houston has been flexible in playing without him throughout the course of the year because of their style of play. So the answer to me would be Houston needs to play their style. And I do think that, we're all talking about how the game is going. Well, somebody's going to be different and buck that trend and end up being really good because they're different. And so I think there's a lot of and that's how it started with all the spread stuff and with guys diving to the rim instead of posting and, all of those type of things. The one true fact is that you don't defend in the post against a 4 or 5 late game very often. You might against LeBron, you might against certain guys. Harden might post up, but it's probably more rare than it was, when we were growing up.
We're Mike and Mike. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Customers who switch to Progressive save an average of $500. Call or click today. Find out if they could save you hundreds on your car insurance. And when I say we're Mike and Mike, we are, because Michael Smith is here, Jemele Hill is here, Brad Stevens is here. I've got a great stat. Now, we have a terrific analytics department here at ESPN. Excuse me. And Ben Alamar is one of the guys who runs that department.
Very good, yeah.
He's terrific. And he's one of the guys that I've gotten a lot of this information from, in addition to our own researcher, Hembo. And he just sent me a note. All right, here's the number. You ready for this? LeBron James made 94% of his dunk attempts this year. A LeBron James dunk, he makes that 94% of the time. Steph Curry, a 3 from the left corner, he shot 66.7% this year. That says Steph Curry shooting from a 3 from the left corner is a better shot than LeBron dunking.
More efficient.
It just is. But you will score more points if they each do that 100 times. It hurts your soul, but it's true. That's my point. To ignore it is to ignore the reality. If they each do that 100 times, right, Steph's team wins.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. I'm not making things up. It's not an opinion. It's just a fact.
The corner 3 especially.
Yeah,
not
and
just
that's become the thing.
Right?
I mean, the math is there. Look, I guess maybe part of me is wondering what kind of influences is going to have on younger players. It's just like what I said with Beyonce and the onesie with Derrick Rose, right? The wrong people are going to be trying this, and next thing you know, we're all like, okay, Beyonce can get away with
Brad,
that.
Did you get that?
My 9-year-old's team attempted at least 15 threes the last game, and me and my assistant coach are sitting up at the top of the bleachers saying, Holy smokes, analytics is down in the 9-year-old level. Of course, my son was probably half of them, which is, we had a little bit of a talk about range after the game. But
Steph Curry can do that. And look, everybody out there, I saw Beyonce in the onesie with Derrick Rose's jersey. She looks great in it. I'm not going to run out and get one. So just because you see Steph Curry and what you said, now all of a sudden you're going to have a generation of or a young group of players like Brad alluded to out there shooting threes when there's so much more, obviously, to learn about the game. So I'm concerned.
I will say this, though. The more of a threat it becomes, the more space there is to operate, the more open dunks you get, the more speed becomes a factor. It is fun to watch.
Well, here was a comparison that was made, and Cerruti will remember who it was that made it. I forget who wrote this, but the second I say it, you'll remember it. The comparison that was made between Steph Curry and Shaquille O'Neal. That you could not pick two more different-looking human beings, right? Steph Curry, I've stood next to him. He's smaller than me. Shaquille O'Neal, I've stood next to him. He makes Golick look like Steph Curry's daughter. He's that big. And yet, the comparison was Ethan Sherwood-Strauss, who wrote a piece in which he said, in the same way that Shaquille O'Neal collapsed your defense until it broke, Steph Curry is now stretching your defense until it snaps, right? You have to come out so far, instead of how you have to collapse so much on Shaq that left other things open. It's the same effect, only in the reverse, that he is now stretching your defense so wide that like a rubber band, it eventually snaps and everything in the world comes up open.
Steph does, Clay does, Harrison Barnes. I mean, that's why there's such a bear to guard, but Steph is obviously the catalyst to all that. We played Steph when he was at Davidson. We went down there when my second year as a head coach at Butler, and I've never seen our guys more in tune to transition defense or pick and roll defense because they were scared to death that this guy could go off by himself, and he has that kind of impact on a game. Obviously in college it was even more pronounced, but now, I mean, the way he's playing is ridiculous.
You mind if I transition topics?
No, go.
Well, because you took it to college for a second, that's actually where my head was, because we're talking about the NBA game and its evolution, and its health. It's fun to watch, the spacing, the flow of the game. Then you have the college game on the other hand. You guys at Butler, you played a very grounded out, style of basketball. A lot of people think that college basketball needs some updating. There's some talk about it. The 30-second shot clock, was that passed? Did they
I think it was recommended. I don't know if it was passed or not.
Was it just recommended?
It was just recommended.
Sure. I think it'll pass. It will pass.
Oh, gotcha. What are your thoughts on the college game if the 30-second shot clock is gonna improve the pace and the scoring?
So it was interesting because from a recruiting standpoint, we fought the perception of we grounded out.
Sorry about that.
Because, well, and I'm saying right now, if you're looking at Butler, they don't do that, right? No, but I think the biggest thing, we tried to be hard to score on. And so if you looked at the 1 year we played in the NCAA tournament in 2010, when we played Michigan State and Duke in the Final Four and finals, we had the ball for an average of 13 seconds of possession. Our opponents had it over 20. And I think but it gave the impression that we were the slower, trying to handle the tempo team. But we were trying to take advantage and be opportunistic. We just wanted to be hard to score on. That's the best defensive team that I've coached relative to level. I think the 30-second shot clock could go both ways. I'm not sold on it. The one thing that I know is the less time, the more it favors talent, which is no matter what, that's going to be the case. And so certainly there's an impact there potentially on the NCAA tournament. There will be more opportunities if you're down late to win. That's going to be clear, and that's going to be different. That's going to feel a little bit different when you're coaching in that college game. A 6-point lead with 2 minutes to go is not going to feel the same with a 30-second shot clock. And then, but I'm concerned that there will be a little bit less motion and a little bit more isolation. And, the level of play is not ready for more isolation versus the pro game.
And to be clear, an NCAA committee proposed a 30-second shot clock. The expectation is it will pass. That happened while I was away, and I actually misread it. When I read it, I thought that they had actually approved it. There is an expectation that it will. And by the way, Stevens over here is a pretty smooth customer. He's sitting here talking about, we had so much respect for Steph in college. We were so scared of him. I just got his numbers in that game. You realize you beat Davidson, he shot 2 of 13.
He was coming off of a sprained ankle. And our former point guard who worked for me with the Celtics, now a college assistant, Ronald Norrid, he claims it's all him. He didn't realize, he didn't give any credit to all the doubling and all the other things that our bigs were doing and how much effort they played with. Our guys respected and were more fearful of him than anybody we played against.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
Busy day here today. Golick is so big we need 3 people to replace him. His and hers are here, Michael Smith and Jemele Hill, and the head coach of the Boston Celtics, Brad Stevens, nice enough to spend a few hours with us in our studio. It's a pleasure to have you here, Brad. And I just saw something coming on Twitter. Guys, I want Mike and Jemele, I want to start with you on this, because I have a feeling this is about to become a big deal. One of these things that becomes a big deal for a few hours, and then people move on to the next big deal thing, because it's hardly the first time this has happened. But I saw Bomani Jones tweeting about it, and I saw, who else? Dan Wolken tweeting about it. LSU has the #1 basketball recruit in the country coming. His name is Ben Simmons, and he has been deemed by most to be the #1 recruit in America to come play basketball for them. And they have launched a marketing campaign. The LSU Athletics Department announced yesterday the beginning of its new season ticket summer sales campaign for the upcoming basketball season, focused on the arrival of Ben Simmons and his chosen jersey number 25. And I can see it on their website. It's a huge 25 is coming marketing campaign. So many people will look at that and they will say, in the climate in which we exist today, with all the questions about the amateurism and everything else, and these kids not getting paid and the billions of dollars that are generated by what he does in the basketball tournament and everything else, do you have a problem with a school so obviously and specifically marketing the sale of tickets around this one player using his jersey number, despite the fact that he falls under the same amateurism rules as everybody else?
A huge problem with it. And if you remember some of their baseless defenses whenever NCAA officials were confronted with the idea of paying players or how they were even marketing players, they would always say, well, you know, we don't do singular marketing. It's about marketing for the school. And even with the jersey numbers, we all know good and well, you know what jersey number your favorite player wears. And they tried to make it seem as if, oh, no, that's just a number. It's not attached to a particular player. Well, this is very clearly attached to a specific player. Mm-hmm. And look, I have felt for a long time that players should be paid. My general sort of philosophy is players should be paid, but while the rules are the rules, if you get caught, then you have to deal with the consequences. However, that being said, this is so over the line. And given the climate and how we have been discussing amateurism, I just can't believe that LSU would actually think this was a good idea when you're so obviously exploiting somebody.
I guess it's just the rubbing it in your face part.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's the #1 recruit in the country. Sure, every school, if they get great recruiting classes or an individual player, it's no secret, hey, you should come out and see this guy for 1-2 years, whatever it is. So I'm sure they're not the first school to trump or tout its recruiting class or an individual recruit. It's just, I guess, attaching it to his jersey number, saying, hey, 25 in particular. It's no different than, you know, the college football players or basketball players, their jerseys being available. You know who the player is. It's available online. The NCAA is selling it, but we're still not saying they should get part of this process.
Yeah, it's something that I've been talking about on this show for many, many years. It frustrates me to the point of being extremely upset. My own alma mater at Northwestern, the year we made the Rose Bowl, one of the great experiences of my life as a sports fan, our star running back was a kid named Darnell Autry. I'll never forget they were selling his jersey in the student bookstore, and he couldn't afford to buy one. Mm-hmm. And that has always stuck in my mind, and it really bothered me. Now, Brad Stevens, coach of the Celtics, cannot comment on the individual player, to be clear. As if anyone's wondering why I'm not going to ask Brad about him and this particular, you can't comment on that. But what you can comment on, having been a coach at the college level for many years, now on the pro level, who knows, maybe someday you'll coach in college again. What are your thoughts on the amateurism rules as they're currently stated? And if you were the king of the world, would you change the way things are done?
Well, I think they're from when I was there 2 years ago, they're making great progress from everything I can tell. I think they've passed the I think the semester stipend or whatever it is that what is the cost of living? I don't remember exactly what they called it. They've changed the meal rules, which was very frustrating. You know,
can you be specific about the frustrating? I remember because it was a kid at Duke who said, at UConn said he was going to sleep hungry. Yeah. What were the rules?
At one time you could provide fruits, nuts, and bagels, or you could provide an occasional meal. Occasional could be defined differently depending on school to school what they deemed occasional, but clearly it was, you know, whether it was once a month or 1.5 times a month or, 18 a year, or whatever the case may be, it's not a lot of meals on top of the room and board they were getting. And, there are times where you're sitting there as a coach and I felt this especially because we went from, I made a really quality living as a basketball coach, way more than I should have made coaching basketball. And you want to take your guys out for more dinner. You want to take them out or have them over to your house for more dinner, or whatever the case may be. And you want to get them the jersey in the bookstore that is theirs, but you can't do those things. It seems like we're making some real logical steps, to be candid, from everything I can tell. But certainly there is still this discussion of whether or not you should be able to use that person's likeness, number, to sell the school or the program, and what they should get in excess of the scholarship. You know, if it was Brad Stevens, who was a mediocre Division III player, you know, and they would have sold my jersey in the bookstore, I'd have been jacked up that my jersey was in the bookstore. And that's the way some of our seniors at Butler felt, because they didn't play beyond that. Now, in retrospect, they may not feel that way. And certainly the better players may not feel that way. And, you know, the higher exposure player you are, and the more ultimately you're probably going to have an opportunity to make money as a pro, I certainly understand the argument.
Did you have anything else on amateurism? Because I had a random question on what that.
Well, I was just going to say that I think part of the reason why the NCAA, I don't know if we would ever, if they could have been able to stop where we are right now, because clearly the original intent was never for college sports to become a $1 billion business. So I realized to some degree they were put at a disadvantage. But because they tried to keep everything, you know, I think that has been, like, had we started making these logical steps, as you put it before, with travel for families or semester stipends.
I'm so glad that passed, because that was
long overdue.
Oh, we played the Final Four in Houston, and we had parents driving and staying an hour and a half away, or couldn't get there, or whatever the case may be, and that made no sense. So I'm so glad they've made strides.
Yeah, they made strides, and I feel like had they made some of those concessions earlier and maybe not dug in their heels as much, then perhaps this conversation would be a little toned down. But now it's at a level where I think those logical steps, it's not going to be enough. And players these days, like 25, like Ben Simmons, they're much more aware of their marketing and branding. Social media has taught them more aware of what they can sell.
And I've been in the NCAA in those meetings. I've been on a bunch of those committees, and they have a really hard job, because at the same time they're trying to look at the 340 schools and try to make it as competitively equal as possible. It's really tough when you're trying to say they're all the same. When we all know that, you know, certain schools, that you just have an advantage because you're at that school. You just have an advantage because of what the arena looks like, or how much money you can put into making your locker room nice, whatever the case may be. And but the people at the NCAA and the work they've put in to try to get it better, I think will just continue. I think the people are great. And, you know, I'm encouraged by all the positive change, even since I left 2 years ago.
The one thing they never limit is how much they can pay the coaches. I seem to notice that. They never seem to say, well, you know what, maybe every coach should get paid exactly the same amount. Maybe the coach at the 316th school should get paid the same amount as Calipari and Krzyzewski. See how quickly things would start to change if they brought up that idea.
Mike and Mike.
All right, let's take it out with whatever you guys have in mind. Run through some questions. Jemele, go.
All right, this is from Mountain Drew, or at Drew_Gallagher. What is a harder process, recruiting a player to play at Butler or trying to decide which player to pick in the draft?
Well, I think it's much harder to recruit somebody, because you're trying to decide if they can play there, and then you have to sell them on playing there, and they can choose. In the draft, we're going to choose who we like
when
we're available, you know, when our pick comes up. So it is a little bit different. But, you know, one of the things we always tried to do was we always tried to interview guys a lot like we did at the Combine, because we wanted them to know, you know, how they were going to be coached once they got there.
All right, let's keep this rolling. A few people want us to ask you how you feel about the hack or whomever strategy.
So I think that it's so different than in college, because in college that would be considered an intentional foul. You know, I think that obviously we've got the flagrant 1 and flagrant 2 fouls, but not intentionals per se. And so I think it's a great topic for discussion. I really don't have a feeling on it. You know, I do it more off of gut than stat, to be honest. There are times where, you know, you're either ahead and you feel like you can, you know, push the lead out, or there are times where you clearly have to do it to come back. But I thought what Steve Kerr said was interesting the other day, that they're a rhythm team and that affects the rhythm, and that makes sense.
All right, this is from B Who the G. If you voted for MVP, who would you have voted for?
Oh, I got to play against all these guys.
You just split it.
I have a list of 30. No. I think obviously, the MVP candidates are all still playing. There's no question about that. The one exception obviously would be Westbrook, the way that he played all the way throughout the year. But Harden and Curry clearly were the ones that were discussed. But LeBron's the best player in the game, so I think when you talk about those three guys, any of them are deserving.
Can we talk about your MVP? Read this somewhere. Is it true that on your first date with your would-be wife, you guys drove 90 miles to a high school basketball game?
And I just got her a big, huge frame picture of the gym for Mother's Day, so I'm a real romantic, right? But hey, when you're married to a florist's daughter, flowers only go so far, right? So, but yeah, it's called the Wigwam. It's in Anderson, Indiana, and one of the great high school gyms in the state of Indiana. Another one of these gyms that seats 7,000 or 8,000, and they were actually thinking about closing it a couple years ago, and I hope that they continue to preserve it.
So she was good with this. She's obviously a keeper because you kept her.
And that's how you should have known.
This is all part of the exam, right?
That's part of
you had to get to know her.
Yeah.
Michael,
great time in the car.
I've never met your wife.
She was there yesterday.
With that, I assume with the 2-year-old being here. How would that have flown? Would your wife be interested in seeing one of the great high school gyms in America? Because I think I can speak fairly comfortably for my wife, Stacy. That would not be high on the list of things she'd be interested in doing.
I'm in sports, and I would say no to that.
Yeah, right, but that just speaks to your dedication to your craft.
Well, she's been to Newcastle, which is Chrysler High School, where we had 5 guys from Newcastle play at Butler. Seats 10,000, and we went there multiple times, after we started dating and then eventually got married. She likes to go to games.
Yeah.
And
wow.
we enjoy the games. We've had to make basketball a part of our family because the schedule's kind of demanding.
My wife brought a friend to our first day because she didn't trust me, but that's another story altogether.
All right, I got another one here for you. Which playoff format do you prefer? 1 versus 8 between conferences, or just go 1 through 16 with the top teams?
From a travel standpoint, clearly 1 versus 8. I mean, the travel's already difficult, but bouncing back and forth across the country, even though you're doing it in private planes and everything else, would still be a challenge. But I don't really have a huge feeling either way.
Are you a great poker player? I wanted to ask you this earlier. Even for a coach, you are remarkably even-keeled. You must be a phenomenal poker player.
I haven't played cards in a long time, but I considered myself to be a reasonable card player back in the day. But I don't know anybody that really. I don't know anybody that really doesn't think they're good. So I don't think that gives me a whole lot of credence. I don't think I was as good as some of my buddies. But no, I've probably gotten better over time at not showing my emotions. So maybe I should pick it up again.
That's what I'm really getting at. I mean, even on the sideline, you're so calm. Does anything rattle you? Anything in life? Does anything get you upset?
Oh, yeah.
Does anything make you yell?
And I think sometimes the cameras just pick you up at the right time. I think I've been lucky in that regard. You almost make a conscious decision to do that, more so when you're the underdog because you're trying to keep your composure for your team. And most of my early time as coaching on TV, we were the underdog. And so maybe that's a product of that. I don't think I'm quite as calm as everybody gives me credit for.
And then the question everyone has been waiting all morning for.
Uh-oh.
You are from Indiana. You are a huge fan of the Indianapolis Colts.
Uh-oh.
You now live in Boston. We seem to have a little bit of a situation between the Colts and the hometown favorite New England Patriots. What has it been? And this question comes from Blue Colts mascot. What's it like being a Colts fan today in Boston?
You know what? It's funny because I've been asked that a lot, especially because they played 2 years in a row in the playoffs. And even during the playoffs, I said one of the things that I'm most not amazed by, but most taken aback by is how similar the two organizations run themselves based on what I know. There
seem to be a lot of things we don't know, however.
Yeah, that's right. But I know, I don't know the new Colts leadership as well as I knew the old, because obviously when I was growing up and when I was in coaching, it was Dungy, Caldwell, Polian, Peyton was the quarterback. It's changed a ton since then. But a lot of the attention to detail, a lot of the focus, a lot of the technique work, all of the stuff that has made them great in those runs is obviously something that the Patriots do. But it's interesting because my kids, they moved to Boston, and now they're Boston sports fans. And, they love the Red Sox. They like the Patriots. They like hockey, which I'm getting used to. They like the Bruins and obviously love the Celtics. But I am pulled in both directions, trust me. I get a lot of calls from both sides.
Well, this has been a real pleasure. I can't say, and for Michael and Jemele and all of us at Mike and Mike, this was so great of you to come up here and spend a few hours.
All day.
Yeah, this is really fun.
Great
for me. I really appreciate it.
We got to show at noon if you want to come kick it.
Stick around. He's like, no, Mike.
It could be his squared and hers for the day.
I think these two handle it great. You handle it great. I appreciate you letting me be here.
Pleasure to have you. Thank you so much, man. Really a pleasure.
In good hands.
Guys, what do you expect tonight? Quick preview of the action tonight in Golden State. You see the game on ESPN, obviously. You got the Rockets. Maybe yes, maybe no on Dwight Howard, and we'll see what he's able to do. Do either of you expect the Rockets to win tonight?
No, I think that Golden State will go up 2-0.
2-0.
And that's going to be it? And what's our lead this morning? Noon, when I'm on my elliptical today, 12:01 Eastern Time on ESPN2. What are the first words out of your mouth?
Probably game one of the Eastern Conference. And we'll get into something we didn't get into this show, which was your man Darrelle Revis acting like he didn't win a ring with these Patriots.
Listen.
That was low down, man.
He's one of us now. He's one of us now. All right, he's back where he belongs.
He always was one of you.
Listen, everything is all well and good. LeBron came home, so did Darrelle. All is well and good with that.
This has been the best of Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio Pod Center. To hear more from Mike and Mike, log on to ESPNradio.com and become an ESPN Radio Insider.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Isn't this weather great, Golick?
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've had a day like this.
Oh, and we're doing it upright. Some Johnsonville brats on the grill, a cold drink in our hands, feet kicked up. This is how to live.
Yeah, can you imagine all those people who have to be inside working on a day like this?
Yeah, those poor people.
Oh, I'm just so glad you found those guys to fill in and take our place on the show today.
Wait, what? I thought you were going to get the guest host for today.
No, Greenie. I said I was going to get some root beer floats.
Well, then who's doing our show right now?
Well, that's not good. We better get back to the studio.
But Golick, the brats are ready.
Oh, man, Johnsonville brats, all that full, juicy flavor that comes from only premium cuts of pork. We could probably enjoy a couple of these before we head back, right?
I don't see why not. That static seems to be doing okay, and it's certainly not going anywhere.
Then neither are we. Pass me one of those Johnsonville brats.
Johnsonville, served with pride since 1945. Find delicious recipes for the grill at johnsonville.com.
The Texas Rangers into the Bronx to face Alex Rodriguez, Mark Teixeira, and the Yankees. The pregame's at 7 Eastern, followed by first pitch at 8, Sunday on ESPN and on ESPN Radio.